When fleshing out a storyline as explosive as Dexter's, there is no shortage of material to work with. As a result, not every scene filmed makes it into the final episode. Today, we are taking a look at Dexter's deleted scenes, starting with one from Resurrection that many of us were sad to miss out on. One of the most interesting deleted scenes fans caught wind of comes from the latest installment of the franchise, Dexter Resurrection, and in a way, it may have been a bit of a two-parter. When Dexter relocated to New York City, he quickly found himself a job. After a chance encounter with Blessing Kamara, a kind-hearted rideshare driver, Dexter decided to become one himself in order to catch a serial killer who had been targeting people in that same line of work. He started by getting a normal car and learning how to blend in with the other drivers. It seemed to be convenient enough and helped him stay afloat in a very expensive city where he had no other source of income. Even without Dexter and Leon's gaggle of serial killers roaming about, New York City still has tons of crime, and in this deleted scene, Dexter fell prey to it himself for once. The prevailing idea is that this shot centered around Dexter's car being stolen. There were so many details included in the scene, including a wild car chase through the city, a possible live victim in the trunk of Dexter's car, and most interestingly, Blessing Kamara silently threatening people while waving a sword around. For a lot of Dexter fans, Blessing was a standout new character in Resurrection. He has a loving family, a simple life, and a dark past of his own. He is said to be returning for the upcoming season, and everyone is wondering what it will bring for him. Some people have even theorized that he's the New York Ripper. That can't be confirmed, of course, but if this deleted scene had been included, it would have only fueled ideas like that. It would have been awesome to witness in its entirety, but in the end, it was left out for a few reasons. The main reason it didn't make the final cut was because, though impressive in theory, it was underwhelming in execution. The mind behind the scene, Marcos Siega, revealed that he was overwhelmed with how the scene came out. The biggest problem was that some streets in New York City can't be blocked off or reserved, and permits to get it all done would have been too difficult to secure. As a result, the chase wasn't as impressive as he thought it would be, and when it was all said and done, the team decided that in the interest of the flow of the show and the ideal runtime, it could be cut all together. What's funny is that parts of this deleted scene were used in a featurette for season 1 of Resurrection, but only briefly. Still, many Dexter fans were wondering what it was supposed to convey, who the potential victim in the trunk was, and how the storyline changed as a result of its removal. But it turns out the story stayed the same. The facts about Blessing's past as a child soldier would have definitely come out once Dexter saw him wielding that sword so expertly. But after his mother died, Blessing explained it all to him in a different scene that was just as amazing, but more subtle. The scene in Dexter's basement apartment after he killed the first Gemini laid the groundwork for Blessing to come clean about his violent childhood, having killed a man as a child soldier and escaping Sierra Leone with his late mother, Prudence. In the end, we missed out on some pretty cool visuals, but we didn't lose any of the substance, plot, or character development. And it seems the directors have managed to pull this off before as well. Molly versus Dexter scene. In Dexter New Blood, the creators had a lot to get done in a short number of episodes. It was essentially the 9th season of the show, despite coming out almost a decade after the original series ended. Every season of the OG series had 11 episodes, but New Blood was only slotted for 10. That meant that they were working with a lot less wiggle room to include certain scenes that may have been fun or interesting, but weren't exactly necessary. One scene that didn't make it into the show was a cheeky moment between Dexter and Molly Park. A popular true crime podcaster, Molly Park made her way to New York to cover the disappearance of Matt Caldwell. Matt became Dexter's first victim in almost a decade, but he wasn't a sympathetic character. Dexter had personal reasons for wanting to kill him, like the fact that Matt was a massive douchebag and killed the white buck Dexter had been using to keep his urges at bay, but Matt was also a murderer in his own right. He killed 5 people and endangered several others by crashing his boat into one that a Wall Street rival of his was operating on the same lake that night. Because of the influence he and his father held in Iron Lake, Matt never faced any consequences for the crime. His friend took the fall, and he was free to continue being awful to everyone he came across. With that information, Dexter felt validated in killing him. Unfortunately for Dexter, Matt's status in the community meant that the investigation into his disappearance wasn't going to go unnoticed the way his Miami murders had for so long. Enter Molly Park. We first see her in episode 3 as the search for Matt is picking up. She introduces herself as a local activist, but Chief Bishop's daughter later reveals that she actually ran a podcast called Mary Fucking Kill and was definitely in Iron Lake to investigate the situation with Matt. Molly's involvement in the case kept it alive even after Kurt wanted to squash it. But before she even made herself known to police, she was in the fish and game shop where Dexter worked. Apparently, there is a scene where Molly meets Dexter at work while looking for winter gear to tide her over during her time in Iron Lake. Molly has a keen eye, and her naturally inquisitive nature and probing questions can put anyone on their back foot. To be a fly on the wall when she encountered Dexter, his nervous energy around the case was sure to be in conflict with Molly's confident curiosity. We will never know how that exchange went down, but just knowing it happened instills intense FOMO, and that isn't the only scene from that episode that didn't make the final cut. In the OG series, Dexter's inner monologue was largely interacted with by Harry, except for the brief stints when his brother Brian took over that front following Rita's death. But in New Blood, there was no Brian Moser, and there wasn't even Harry. Instead, Deborah took up the place in Dexter's mind they used to occupy. Dexter never really forgave himself after Deb died. He may not have been the person who shot her or put her on life support, but he was the person who took her off of it. He dumped her body in the ocean before fleeing Miami. When he finally found himself all alone in Iron Lake, staving off his urges and trying to move on, Deb's voice was the only one guiding him. She was the person he knew had a moral compass unlike anyone else in his life. Better than his, better than Harry's. Deb was the perfect inner voice to keep him from killing for 10 years. And over the course of New Blood, we got plenty of Deb. Funny Deb, loving Deb, investigative Deb, etc. But we didn't get all of her. A few of the scenes showcasing her impacting Dexter's psyche even in death were cut out of the final show. It may have helped with keeping the storyline succinct and clean, but most fans would have loved to see what she had to say to him in the pivotal moments that didn't make it to air. First, there was the scene that showed Dexter running through the snow at night with Matt's vest to create a false scent trail. Throwing off the police dogs would help him avoid any additional scrutiny from police, and that was what mattered the most for the continuation of the story, more than his hallucinated conversation with his dead sister. There was another deleted scene, which we catch a glimpse of in the promo for episode 3. Dexter is incinerating Matt's body on the outskirts of town, and Deb can be seen there next to him, asking if he has, quote, learned nothing. Who knows the full extent of his internal conversation that night now? It may have been nothing, or it could have been highly entertaining. Either way, most of us would have loved to see it, because Deb had been dropping truth bombs and reality checks on Dexter the entire season of New Blood. Whatever she had to say that day in the woods or at the incinerator as Dexter desperately tried to cover up yet another kill would have been raw, illuminating, and well earned. Maybe the show's creators will release the full deleted scenes one day, but for now we are left wondering what happened and how it would have impacted Dexter. But the missing material doesn't end there. Audrey Bishop versus Edward Olsen. Another deleted scene in New Blood was one that would have wrapped up a forgotten storyline and also been a fun catch for any eagle-eyed fans out there. By the time Dexter arrived, the town of Iron Lake had been plagued by a series of missing persons cases, all of which involved a young transient woman who vanished into thin air. The town's police chief and Dexter's then girlfriend, Angela Bishop, was dedicated to solving the missing persons cases, largely because it was the disappearance of her own childhood best friend, Iris, that really started the entire spree. And despite witnessing a lost young woman lured and trapped somewhere in Iron Lake, we as viewers still had no idea who was responsible or if that abduction was even related to Chief Bishop's investigation. It's made clear pretty soon after that the young woman we saw in the tavern in episode 1 was, in fact, another victim of the runaway killer, but it was still not obvious who that might be. There were a few suspects, but the most obvious one in the beginning was the morally bankrupt oil tycoon, Edward Olsen. Every young person in Iron Lake was against him because of his constant misuse of his opulent wealth and the negative impact that his business has had on the environment. He was outwardly kind, but also sort of menacing. Add to that all of his money and power, and you were looking at a perfect suspect for someone who would violate and disappear young women without ever being caught. But of course, he was just a red herring. By episode 5, it's made clear that the runaway killer is actually none other than Matt Caldwell's dad, Kurt Caldwell. And as satisfying of a reveal as that was, it left so many fans wondering why Olsen had been focused on so much in the first place. It was a brilliant misdirect, but what happened to him? Where he ended up going, and any additional details about his dealings were literally never delved into again. Maybe they didn't need to be. After all, he was just a red herring. He served his purpose. But there was a scene that would have tied everything together nicely had it not been cut from the show entirely. In a deleted scene which would have been aired in New Blood's 5th episode, Runaway, Harrison is shown walking up a road in Iron Lake when Audrey Bishop approaches him and asks if he needs a ride home. This would have been after Harrison's near-fatal overdose at the party, making her concern more palpable. But more importantly, in that deleted scene, Olsen's helicopter could be seen flying away from Iron Lake. In that moment, Audrey flips off the chopper as it flies overhead. By the end of the episode, it would have been very evident that Olsen was only meant to throw us off the trail of the real killer. In fact, in one of the very next scenes, Kurt is shown killing the latest girl he lured to his cabin. Perhaps that is why they chose to cut the helicopter exit. It may have tied Olsen's storyline together. He came to Iron Lake to handle some business, ruffled a few feathers, and then left as suddenly as he appeared. But with Kurt being exposed as the runaway killer less than 4 minutes later, it became unnecessary to show Olsen's exit. He was little more than a plot device to show Audrey's values and leave fans guessing about who the big bad was. Still, without that scene, many were left wondering what happened to him. Mystery solved, but the deleted scenes keep coming. There are some scenes cut from the 8th episode of New Blood as well, but with far less details about what they were meant to tell us. In this episode, titled Unfair Game, there was another Deb scene that didn't make it into the finished project. She's shown standing next to Dexter as he does something in the woods. They are surrounded by snow, and Ghost Deb is shown crying, with no real information about what Dexter was even doing there in the first place. It's hard to know what he was imagining that would have upset his inner guide to the point of tears. Really anything. The evidence for this scene existed only in the promo shots for the episode, but beyond that, there's nothing. Dexter can basically never cry, but Deb never had a problem showing her emotions. We know that Dexter was in the middle of being kidnapped by Kurt Caldwell's henchman, Elric Kane. From the back of Elric's truck where he was tied up, Dexter heard Elric and Kurt discussing their plan and the fact that Kurt had Harrison. Hearing that made Dexter spring into action immediately, attacking Elric and causing them to crash and allowing him to escape into the woods. Dexter would do anything for Harrison, and knowing that he was in the hands of a madman, but not knowing how or if he could even get to him would be enough to make him want to cry, and Deb had been telling him for weeks that he would endanger Harrison. If she were alive and she knew about their predicament, especially how endangered Harrison was, she definitely would have become emotional. But for now, the meaning behind the scene remains unknown. There were a couple of throwaway scenes from Unfair Game that ended up on the shop floor as well. A few shots of the Christmas festivities in Iron Lake. Angela was shown in the shots, which may explain why they were cut. According to the timeline of the episode, she would have been at home poring over the Bay Harbor Butcher evidence as she got closer and closer to Dexter's truth. She couldn't possibly be doing both at once, and her BHB investigation takes precedence. So, despite the fact that the shots looked stunning with beautiful lights and Christmas decorations, they had to be scrapped, along with one other scene from this episode, which really didn't add much of anything, if we're being honest. The final shots cut from this episode show Dexter after he escaped Elric's truck and found an abandoned summer camp in the area. It's fleeting, but before Elric finds him there, Dexter is shown looking into a mirror with the words, "You're beautiful," painted on the top. Like any good lackey, Elric was determined to complete the mission Kurt sent him on, and that meant recapturing Dexter. So he followed Dexter's trail in the snow to the very location, but he should have thrown in the towel after the crash. Within just a few moments of Elric arriving, Dexter would break through that very same mirror and kill him before stealing his truck and rushing to save his son. Those are the scenes we did see, but the deleted scene would have shown how and why Dexter was hiding behind that mirror to begin with. Still, it wasn't very important. The most interesting part of the shot was Dexter checking his head wound in his reflection, finding the source of his bleeding, and then tasting it off of his own finger before hiding to get the jump on Elric. It's obvious why it was cut. In a season trying to tie up an entire series in just 10 episodes after one incredibly disappointing series finale, there is not a lot of time for filler. At least the scene lives on through the stills and GIFs released officially by Showtime, and the deleted scenes just keep coming. The alternate ending filmed for scar tissue. Even further back in season 8 of Dexter, there was yet another scene we'd never see. After discovering that her brother was a serial killer, covering for him, and then killing for him, Deborah Morgan was at the end of her rope, both mentally and emotionally. She couldn't be near him after she killed Maria LaGuerta to protect him. She could barely even live with herself. She quit her job at Miami Metro and took on private investigation work that put her in harm's way constantly, but she wasn't stable, not even close. But Dexter was determined to get her back to safety and rebuild their relationship, so he tracked her down and managed to get her to talk to him, but she was in no way okay with him, what he was, or what he had turned her into. And when she learned that her father's death was because of Dexter, she finally snapped. While she and Dexter were driving one day, he revealed the truth to her about Harry's suicide. At that moment, Deb grabbed the steering wheel and veered the car into a lake, attempting to kill them both, getting rid of their stain on Miami once and for all. But a bystander saw the accident and immediately dove into the water to help them. He was only able to get Deb out, but Dexter was still belted into the car. Seeing Dexter nearly drown was too much for her. He was still unconscious, but she was wide awake now. Deb is not a natural killer like her brother. She dove back into the water and swam deep to get to him. It seemed hopeless at that point, but before the credits were shown, they reached the surface of the water, with Deb using all of her strength and adrenaline to keep Dexter's head above water. It makes you wonder if the writers meant to do that, where Deb ends up saving Dexter's life in the water, and Dexter dumps her lifeless body into it. But the deleted scenes shows Deb giving Dexter mouth-to-mouth resuscitation and chest compressions, desperate to save her brother's life by whatever means necessary. That would have been a very powerful thing to witness, for sure, and some people wonder why it was cut. After the incredibly awkward and unwanted B plot from season 6, where Deb believed that she was in love with Dexter, perhaps the CPR moment would have been uncomfortable for fans to witness. Alternatively, it could have been left out because the directors thought the episode would have more impact as a cliffhanger, with Dexter's condition sort of hanging in the balance at the end of the final cut. Whatever the reason, the scene never made it to the air, and for a season as poorly reviewed as season 8, it's hard to know if it would have made much of a difference. Brian leaving town in the Original Sin finale. In Dexter Original Sin, the characters we came to love from the original series were shown in a new light. We all loved seeing Masuka, Angel, and Maria working at Miami Metro in their younger forms, but perhaps the most interesting origin story presented was that of the infamous Brian Moser. Long before he became the ice truck killer, Brian Moser was terrorizing Miami under a different MO. After his mother was killed by the cartel, Harry and Doris Morgan tried to adopt him and Dexter, but Brian was way too much for them to handle. Brian tried to kill Deb when she was just a baby, slapped Harry in the face when he tried to discipline him for it, and broke the glass out of their front door in a fit of rage. Of course, Brian had every reason to be angry. He was just a child, and his entire life had already been stolen from him, thanks to the actions and corruption of Harry Morgan. There is no doubt that he was exhibiting a few concerning tendencies before his mother's death, but after she died, he was forever changed. Brian didn't seem to care about anyone else's needs or comfort. The one person he did care about, Dexter, was ripped from him when Harry and Doris placed him back into the system. But Brian never stopped looking for his brother and trying to reunite with him. Once he was old enough to leave the foster care system, he did everything in his power to get back to Dexter. But when they finally met, Dexter didn't recognize him or even remember he existed. Dexter was too young to recall the events that happened in the shipping container the day his mother was killed, and he was so traumatized after it happened that he blocked out everything before. So Brian had no choice but to try and get close to him another way. He started killing people in and around Miami who had tormented him as a child in the foster care system. This was partially to get his own revenge and partially to lure Dexter to crime scenes that he could then watch him work. But eventually, Harry caught wise of what Brian was up to, and after being called to a crime scene that sounded eerily similar to the way their mother was murdered, He confronted Brian one-on-one, begging him to leave Dexter alone so he could live a more normal life. Despite knocking Harry out and running, Brian agreed that Harry was right. Dexter may be better off without him. In the scene we get to see in the series finale, Brian's final moment near Dexter was spent on the outside of a restaurant where he, Deb, and Harry were dancing after successfully concluding the Jimmy Powell/Nikki Spencer case and learning that Deb had been accepted into the police academy. Maybe Brian had planned on crashing their little celebration, but instead, he just watched them from afar, no doubt feeling the pain of jealousy and defeat. And that was that. But in the deleted scene just after watching them, Brian can be seen holding a passport and a plane ticket as he hails a cab. What the fuck? It isn't clear from the photos what his intended destination was, and to this day we still don't know where Brian was between the years of Original Sin's end and the original series beginning. But this deleted scene seems to suggest that he left the country, which begs so many questions about where he landed and what crimes he committed while he was abroad. With Original Sin's premature cancellation, we may never know, but this scene could have spurred so many more fan theories and discussions about Brian's life outside of Dexter. Maybe one day we will get a spin-off or a limited series that fills in all those blanks. For now, our minds are left wondering about all of that. Which scenes do you wish had made the final cut? Do you know of any we missed? Drop a comment to fill us all in. And if you liked this deep dive, check out our video breaking down every reason that Lady Vengeance may still be alive. Don't delete the scene where you slash that subscribe button. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.